Hey, this is Richie coming at you from the School of Marketing HQ. Before you dive into the show, I just want to tell you about a brand new short 12-week program that we've launched called the Giants Marketing Masterclass. The program gives you access to insights from over 25 CEOs and CMOs from major companies in 6 areas: customer, brand, commercial, creative, channel, and data strategy. So if you are looking to upskill yourself or your team in just 2.5 hours each week, do check out the School of Marketing website for more deets. Alrighty, for now, enjoy the show. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Places We'll Go show. I've really got to say that I've been really looking forward to this episode, and it's been in the diary for quite a while now. But genuinely, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome Paul Coxhill, the CEO of WARC, to join us today to share his insights. Now, most of you, I am sure, will be familiar with WARC, but those who are not, it's in summary, probably the leading publication for marketing, media, and creative knowledge, I would say, in the world. Its contributions to the marketing industry have truly and continue to be quite unparalleled. And honestly, if there's any place you want to go for cutting edge information and insights, this is exactly where you want to be. But look, I'm not here to advertise WARC, I'm here to talk to Paul. But anyway, so today we're going to speak to Paul about his illustrious career, which really has spanned multiple countries and organizations. But beyond being the CEO title, what really makes Paul stand out is his dedication to a number of social initiatives as well that he supports. And I'm really happy to say that the School of Marketing is included within that. But he's also on things like the Essentials Million Makers, which raises money for the Prince's Trust. Now, before his role at WARC, he was the CEO of Lions Intelligence. The lions that host the Cannes Lions, only the most coveted awards on this planet in the marketing space. Yep, those. And he also worked in South Africa for Absa Bank as the GM. And he's actually had a long-standing career at Barclays as well. And finally, just to know and great to know that our paths have crossed on many fronts, since both me and Paul are alma maters of Warwick University too. So Paul, absolute pleasure to have you on. Really can't wait to kick off.
Thank you, Richie. Thanks for the introduction. Great to be here.
Yeah, lovely to have you on, Paul. It's great to have you on for 2 very specific reasons. One is, well, 2 things that I really cherish and love is that you're a marketer turned CEO. Not too many of those around, and also the very currency of WARC is marketing effectiveness, which is very close to my heart. But as I said, this is about you. So let's start with you. And how are you doing? Where are you, and how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing really well, thank you. And Richie mentioned the Million Makers program that we're very active in, and actually we've got one of our big fundraising moments coming up next week, next Tuesday. So we're busy in preparation mode for that now, to raise hopefully loads of money for a fantastic cause. So that's a big focus. And then of course, WARC as a business is continuing to grow from strength to strength, but as with everybody at the moment, with some headwinds around in the economy. So it's an interesting time to be a leader in marketing.
Hey, I feel you, Paul. Go, Mark.
Just on the Million Makers, actually, Paul, good shout out. We'll need to drop a link or do something. If there's any way that we can give a bit of amplification, then just let us know, because it's a fantastic cause. Sorry, Richie, back to you.
No, not at all. Paul, you alluded to the headwinds. I'd like to touch on that for a minute, because I'm sure at this moment in time, people are probably feeling that quite acutely. And I guess, what are some of the things that you're seeing, and perhaps what are kind of the things that you're doing to mitigate?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're at a really interesting confluence of many different things at the moment. Obviously, still dealing with the aftermath and the ongoing pandemic in different parts of the world. The war in Ukraine, the cost of living crisis, and social change all over the world as well, which has been ongoing but ramping up, particularly in these past few years. So I think what marketers are looking for is more information and insight to help them navigate that. And so, we're in a fantastic place as WARC that we can help people. And actually listen to what's going on in the market, listen to what our customers are asking, and then actually help them to navigate through some of those changes. So that's the kind of the macro picture, actually, is that from a WARC perspective, it creates an opportunity for us to be even more relevant than we have been in the past. I think, though, on a human level, obviously, we've got to make sure that for our people and for the marketing industry in general, we're listening to how people are feeling, how they're doing, and how we can support them to get through it. Because it's as I say, though, it's not just one thing. It's the fact that there are lots of things which is creating anxiety out there in the marketplace generally, and for all employees in particular. So I think as a leader, I'm spending a lot of time listening. A lot of time gathering feedback from people just to make sure that we can be responsive, but also a lot of time listening to customers and what's going on in the market to make sure our product and proposition is as relevant as ever. But business as usual is certainly not where we are right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a perfect storm in the world. Interesting that you framed the role of WARC at a meta level as helping, and then a lot of the stuff that you do, Million Makers and beyond, is in that space of helping. So tell us a little bit about the DNA of Paul Coxhill as relates to wanting to help in the world.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't think about it like that necessarily. But look, I mean, I think particularly as my career has progressed, I don't just want to be here and doing a role or playing a role in the industry that is just here to do the day job and deliver that job and grow for the sake of growth, if that makes sense. But actually, for me, the growth comes by being relevant and useful and helpful, both at a company level, but also at an individual level. So from a company perspective, if we want to continue to grow, obviously we have to be doing relevant stuff. Otherwise, people will just switch off and will not come and consume our content anymore. So I think that helpfulness is actually ultimately a great commercial outcome. But it's not starting from a place of commerciality. It's starting from a place of listening, learning, and responding, so that we can then be more helpful. And I think for me as an individual, Mark, that's very much, again, as I'm nearly 30 years into marketing now. I want to make sure that experience that I've gained over that time, I can also usefully give back. And Million Makers is one way of doing that. The School of Marketing work with Richie is another. But if we're not helping that next generation to come through into the industry that we're already passionate about and care about, then I don't think we're doing justice to the experience that we've gained.
I really want to shout out on this point, because you truly walk the talk in this respect, and the helpfulness that you've lent to us, and I'm sure many of the other initiatives you're involved in, Paul, is really second to none and unparalleled. And I'm sure all people like us and many are grateful for what you do, and the position that you take in this respect as well, which I think is quite rare, and looking beyond just the nose of an organization and much wider into the wider world and the like. So thank you. It is really great. Paul, I want to ask, right, because we typically have lots of chief marketing officers who come on the show and the like, but it is always almost quite a rarity when we get a CEO. And I'd love to kind of hear a little bit about the transition of moving from marketing into a CEO role. How have you found that, and maybe some of the lessons around them?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Richie. When I look at it at a macro level, I'm surprised there aren't more people who move from CMO to CEO, because if you think about what a CEO needs to understand, the market needs to be commercial and be long-term as well as short-term. So be able to be fleet of foot, but also be able to be thinking about vision and long-term planning. And those are all qualities that a CMO has to have as well. So, I'm surprised that there isn't more movement from CMO to CEO, to be honest. But I guess if I take a step back, I've always thought of marketing as all elements of the mix. So not just comms, but product, proposition, pricing, etc. And if you have that lens on marketing, actually marketing has to be right at the center of the organization. It has to have a seat at the table in all discussions that are of strategic as well as short-term nature, and be really front and center in the commercial part of the organization. And I think if that's the role that marketing is playing, and then you're in the right conversations to naturally lead to a career path that could take you to a commercial role or a product role, or indeed a CEO role. So I think even when I've worked in organizations that have thought of marketing as being more comms than the breadth I've just described, I've naturally always been really interested in the commercial part of the organization and have gravitated to have those conversations and then talk about the role of marketing in helping the business to grow. And by being in those conversations, I think then have led to growth and to the expectation from the C-suite that I will be in the conversation around organizational development and not just purely focusing on the campaign that we're delivering next Tuesday. And so that longer term thinking has naturally led me to be in the debate and the discussion at strategic level. So it didn't feel like a massive leap to move, because I've always thought of marketing much more broadly. It didn't feel like a massive leap to then move into the C-suite job. And as I say, I think it's a path that I'd encourage more marketers to take.
Yeah, hallelujah to that. And therefore, obviously, it's, WARC is all about effectiveness. So you're in the sweet spot. Just a brief shout out to the Marketing Academy Fellowship, which is there to help people to get from 100%. CMO to CEO, because it's not always the easiest journey in that regard. But in terms of, just one follow-up question on being a CEO, is it something that you always had in your mind's eye, or just kind of a loosely held thought, or not really thought that far ahead? How did you think about the prospect of that elevation in advance of it?
Yeah, I think, Mark, probably for the last 10 years or so, it's something that was always in my mind's eye. If I go back to Warwick University, I studied marketing as part of a broader business degree. So I didn't only do marketing and always enjoyed that kind of breadth of experience, and then chose marketing as the kind of first function, but always came at it from a data and insight perspective. So my first few jobs at Barclays were very focused on data and insight and building that grounding rather than starting a different part of marketing. And I think that foundation was really helpful later on to make sure that the jobs that I was doing in marketing always came back to insight, first of all, and always came back to measurable outcomes, so that when you're in that kind of senior discussion, you can show the impact that marketing is actually making. And I think as I just naturally got more and more interested over time in how businesses operate and how businesses run. And as a result of that, over the last few years, started to think actually an aspiration to ultimately run a business would be great. And clearly, being part of Essential, acquiring WARC 4 years ago was a great opportunity, and very fortunate in a way for me that it's a business facing into the marketing industry. So as a marketer taking my first CEO job, I had a chance to do a job in an industry I understood. So that was a helpful first move.
Love it when a plan comes together.
Fortunate. Yes, that plan was definitely luck.
So in that respect, and alluding to the point that this is sort of your first opportunity in the big seat in that sense, clearly you must have had lots of learnings, ups and downs, and the show isn't all about being the superstar all the time. So what have been some of the downsides and the downs that you may have had, or learnings along the way?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something I think about a lot. I mean, obviously, I've made lots of mistakes in my career, as hopefully we all have, because we should all be making a few mistakes to learn as we go. But I think the first, I've sent an email to 1 million people that was supposed to go to 50,000 people. I've made lots of kind of individual silly mistakes along the way. But I think if I look back, there's no major regrets about the career path I've taken, because the learnings that I've had have got me to where I am today, which I'm delighted to be where I am today. But I think there's a few things I probably didn't appreciate, and Richie, we've talked a bit about this before, quite how lucky I was in the first few years of my career as a white guy from a middle class background with a good university education, coming into a blue chip organization. There were quite a lot of things that I think other barriers that other people from different backgrounds would have had to overcome that I didn't. So I think there was the learning I have now, although I didn't appreciate it then, was that, you know, I think that privilege enabled me to come in and to progress relatively quickly without necessarily having to overcome some of those other obstacles that other people have to. So that's not a mistake, but it's certainly a learning for me that there was an awful lot of luck at the beginning of my career to end up in the right place. I think as I progressed and I look back now, in my 20s in particular, I was progressing through Barclays reasonably quickly, but in the end, actually, I think the learning that I have now is I got too specialized. And I think partly that was because I was very ambitious, and I was chasing the next promotion rather than building the bank of learning that would have stood me in good stead. So, you know, if I look back, towards the end of my 20s, I ended up in quite specialized insight and CRM jobs, and in the end had to make a different move, which was actually to South Africa, to get back out to be in a more generalist background and build up more of a general bank of marketing knowledge and experience to then make that next stage. So I think my motivations were in my 20s sometimes were the wrong ones, because it was all about trying to succeed and trying to succeed from a career perspective rather than actually trying to learn so that I could have a better opportunity later.
Yeah, I guess we all go through this, don't we? You know, if only we had, if only we knew. But very, very interesting the way you talk about being ambitious, but then almost jettisoning in a way to South Africa. Big move. I mean, going the other side of the world kind of thing. Tell us a bit about that transition and what you got out of that.
Yeah, I mean, that was certainly, those 3 years in Johannesburg were a career highlight. There's no doubt. So I had Barclays was going through the process of acquiring Absa Bank, which recently they've sold. So I had an opportunity to go out and lead some of the integration from a marketing perspective and a CRM perspective to leverage best practice in Barclays and take that to Absa. So an amazing opportunity, and it was very interesting actually. When I arrived, I was one of the later arrivals of about 100 people from Barclays who were shipped out to try and bring the organizations together. What I realized very early on in that process was that the most important thing was listening, and going and listening to the people in the Absa organization, because you can imagine you parachute in 100 people from the UK who are going to tell you how to do your job better in order to be able to grow the business. And that's not always necessarily the most empathetic way to proceed, and didn't necessarily build relationships very well. So, you know, I spent a lot of time listening to what the people in the organization thought they could do differently and better, because actually most of the answers were there already. It's just that they hadn't had the opportunity to deliver them. So a lot of time building relationships with people in the organization. But I think probably the bigger learnings, Mark, which are very relevant to what I'm doing today. South Africa itself is just a fascinating place. And, you know, this is 2005 to 2008, roughly. So still going through only 15, 16 years post-apartheid. Still an awful lot of impact, as there is even today, from the decades of apartheid on the education system, on opportunities for people. So in my second half of my time there, I was seconded into Absa to do a job in the bank for about 18 months, and to establish a new team. And in that environment, at the time, there were quotas, racial quotas of how many people you needed to employ from different types of backgrounds in your team. And that was still, for some of the people who'd been in the bank a long time, hard. We had some really interesting experiences of having to look much harder to find talent, but the talent was there. But then also recognizing that sometimes you have to nurture and train that talent to come through, particularly from non-white communities. And we found some absolutely fantastic people, but had to give them lots of support to be able to succeed. But what I learned, which is so relevant today, is that the talent is always there. You just have to sometimes look in places that you didn't look before, and be willing to invest and train a little bit harder and to get people to unleash that opportunity. So, huge amount of learning for me from that time period, from the society perspective as well as the work perspective, but certainly 3 of the best years of my career.
Paul, you're touching on a number of topics so close to my heart. I mean, South Africa certainly being one. I spent a lot of time with Nedbank, and I used to travel up to South Africa and Joburg 4 or 5 times a year. And it was the most wonderful, wonderful experience. And the culture, the people, the friendliness, just the openness. I often, before getting back on the flight, coming back to London, I was kind of like, why am I even doing it? Why am I bothering coming back? It's just wonderful. And so I totally echo that. And, the thought, and of course, we're struggling in the UK today as well on a similar level where, people do need to find a wide variety of different talent. And actually, we're losing out. We're losing out big time. And it's that classic saying, right? Talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. And I think that's, that's so, so pertinent. Paul, we had lunch a couple of months ago now, and there was something you said at that meeting, which I just really struck with me, was when you talked of that, you're sitting in the shoes at WARC, the top shoes, and you said, I'm just a custodian of the brand for a number of years. And I loved that turn of phrase because it had such a humility to it. And I'd love to explore that a little bit more about how you see your role as the CEO, perhaps in the long-term journey of the WARC brand and how it evolves.
Yeah, and I said that very, very consciously, Richie. I mean, if you go back, WARC has been around for 40 odd years. Mike Waterson, who founded it and who we acquired the business from, he founded it back in the 80s from listening to some of the gods of advertising talk about the fact that there wasn't a place, there wasn't a home for all of the best practice and the insight that the marketing industry had, that was kind of written down in lots of different places, but it wasn't consolidated. And what they said was that we don't have the ability to stand on the shoulders of giants because we haven't got a place where, like doctors would have or lawyers would have, where they have got a bank of learning that they can bring to the start of their job that they can then build on. So that was what really triggered Mike in the first place to found WARC, which was magazines and books and ad stats books, which some people in the industry will be familiar with from back in the day, and then eventually became an online platform. And I think the role, when you go back to that purpose, why was it first created? That's still relevant today. In fact, potentially even more relevant today than it was then. And for me, what I need to make sure I do is continue to grow WARC's relevance, but make sure that the brand is in a really strong place to continue to deliver that mission for the next 40, 50 years. So I think, it struck me, and I may have said this to you before, Richie, that, from being a marketer for 20 odd years, it was only actually a few years ago, a couple of years before we acquired the business, that I'd heard of WARC. And I think a lot of agency folks had heard of WARC a long time before a lot of brand marketers. And so I think as soon as you show the platform to people, they generally think it's great and, wish they'd had it for a long time. So, my job really is to try and make sure that we get the amazing content that we produce and the work that we do in front of as many people as possible, because, obviously there's a commercial imperative there, but I genuinely think that what we have on there helps you be a better marketer and helps to train young people with a foundation level of marketing and then to continue to grow and improve. So from my perspective, my job is to help WARC be in front of as many people around the world who do this amazing job called marketing.
Yeah, I'm happily vouch for the fact that WARC output, the content and the product is top notch. Well, I'm going to take us in a bit of a different direction. So I got some feedback a couple of days ago from Claire Morehouse back at Direct Line, if you're listening, Claire, calling me out on, I didn't do something particularly brilliantly in a comms moment, nothing major, but straightforward and good feedback. And she was right, and it was a good thing. And it reminded me that we had Tom Roach on a few weeks ago.
Yep.
And he talked about the 3 C's of BBH, conservatism, complacency, and cynicism. And he said he was once called out on the fact that he'd become a bit too cynical, and that was the killer of curiosity. And it was a really real pivot moment in his self-perception, and then at a point of change. So on the subject of feedback, what's some of the best or most pivotal, single maybe most important piece of feedback you've had that has stopped you in your tracks and made you think a bit differently?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mark. And lots, to be honest. I mean, if I look back, I mentioned this a little bit earlier on. I think sometimes at various points in my career, I've been more concerned about how the message is coming across rather than what the message is, if that makes sense. So some of the best, probably one of the best feedback, as soon as you asked the question, it's popped up to the top of my mind. One of the best pieces of feedback I ever had a few years ago was worry less about the presentation and worry more about the message. And underneath that was kind of worry less, I guess, a little bit about what people are thinking of you at the time, and worry more about what you're trying to say. And I think that was really, really powerful because, if you imagine, I used to sometimes get quite nervous in front of senior audiences, internally as well as exit, but more internally, to be fair. And, that got in the way, actually, of delivering the message that I was trying to communicate. Because often there've been an amazing amount of work that's gone into producing a piece of work or a presentation to share internally. And if you as the communicator are getting in the way of communicating that work, then actually you're not doing justice to all the people who have actually put in loads of hours to deliver it. So, for me, actually, that was really pivotal to just say, focus on the work, focus on the message, and worry less about how you as an individual are coming across.
How wonderful. What a wonderful piece of insight. Really, really cool.
Yeah. And I think it's a little bit about relaxing into yourself, and being authentic. One of the things that's really important for me as a leader is authenticity. And I spend a lot of, when we first acquired WARC, I spent a lot of time with the people in the business then, talking about who I was, what my background was outside work, what I was interested in, etc. And I think it's trying to bring as much of your whole self as you are comfortable doing to work and to what you do day to day. We spend so much time here doing it. That if you've got a mask that's trying to be someone else in this, half to 2/3 of your life you're spending at work, that's quite hard work mentally, actually, to do that. So, for me, that was all about kind of getting yourself out of the way, focusing on the work, and then everything else will look after itself.
Fantastic. Well, that's what lovely advice both you were given and how you've articulated it. I want to change tact again. You are part of the group which obviously owns, as I alluded to, the most coveted award ceremony our industry has to offer, the Cannes Lion. And in fact, WARC played a significant role this year, and had a stage which I know you're doing, and you and Barbara, your CMO, was doing a lot of preparation for. So give us a little bit of insight into the world of Cannes from your perspective, and perhaps I'm sure some people listening in may have gone, some may have not. So love to get your take on it.
Yeah, well, first of all, it was great to be back, of course, in Cannes, and welcome the industry together once again, because it had been a couple of years of doing virtual events, and this was the first time we could bring people physically back together, which was fantastic. And I think the industry really responded to that. There was a huge desire to be present, and we were thrilled to be back there face to face. I think the virtual component now lives on, and that's really important because that makes everything that we do much more accessible. But having people there in Cannes this year was, it felt very engaged. It felt very important, actually, as a moment for the industry to reconvene after some time of being away, to celebrate, obviously, the great work through the awards, but also to spend time listening and debating as well. So, it's in terms of getting ready for Cannes, I think, which is when we were together, Richie, is always a lot of work to make sure that we've got a really compelling agenda and that we've got something people want to listen to. From a WARC perspective, we had 20 hours of content across the week, some amazing speakers, Karen Nelson Field, Peter Field, and Orlando Wood, many others. And so it felt like a real gathering of a lot of the effectiveness community. And that content really landed with people. Yeah. We got amazing feedback on it because it gave them some immediate takeaways that attendees could action, as well as the bigger vision ideas that they get from other parts of the festival. So yeah, it was a busy time, but a really successful event.
Yeah, a pinnacle event. So you're in the business of effectiveness, and there will be many marketers listening to this who aren't on the board or the exec, are seen as the communication the comms lead, want to be seen as commercially credible and marketing as an investment rather than a cost. I mean, that's kind of your game. So what are your aside of obviously WARC is a brilliant resource, what are your top tips about the way that people should sort of carry themselves in order to be seen as a commercially credible marketing leader?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mark. Look, I think there's a few things. The first is to really understand how your marketing goals connect to the business goals and be able to tell that story really, really clearly. We meet, or I meet a surprising number of marketers who don't necessarily know what the business goals are. And they may know the marketing goals, but they may not understand how they connect. And I use the word goals because it's not just about sales, obviously. I mean, that's one aspect of effectiveness is selling more of whatever it is you're trying to sell. But effectiveness for us is a much broader thing. It's the achievement of the growth goals that you as a marketing function have, and they could be consumer behavior change. I think one of the best examples of a marketing campaign recently was the hands, face, space. During the pandemic, that wasn't trying to sell anything, that was trying to fundamentally change behavior and save lives. And that's when that marketing as an industry can make a huge impact, because it actually genuinely led to people doing things differently and saving lives. So whatever the goals are, whether they're sales goals, brand growth goals, or whatever, I think understanding what they are and how they connect to the business goals, number one, is really, really important. Secondly, then is repeatedly communicating how you're doing against those and how that's impacting the business. Because it's, I think one of the things that marketers sometimes are guilty of is do an annual plan and then talk about it again next year. And say, right, 12 months, let's look back and see how we did. I think you have to constantly be having the conversation to say, this is what we said we'd do, this is how we're doing, these are where the numbers are, and repeating that again and again. And not a long list of metrics, 3 to 5, just focus on the big ones and then show how that links back to the wider organization. So I think, getting those foundational pieces right is really important. And then I think the second thing, which we touched on a little bit earlier, is talking and listening, and speaking to the product function, speaking to the commercial function, the HR function, the finance function. Make the CFO your best friend, but really understand their challenges and what they're trying to achieve, so that when you're talking to them, you're talking in their language, because I think that's that universal translator that marketing can be, actually, and the conductor that it can be across the organization. If done well, it can make a huge difference. So I'd say align the goals, talk about them regularly, and then really understand the language that you need to deliver that into the different functions to make sure that you're relevant to them.
Awesome. That's a lovely summary, actually, of being able to really understand how to create commercial value and influence change in the organization. Paul, coming up to the end of the segment, so this will be the last question. If you had to offer one piece of advice to a young person who's either just about to get in or looking to get into our industry, what would it be?
It's something I think about a lot, Richie. I think the most important thing, I think, is really to make sure that you're following your passion. Because, you know, we touched on this earlier, you spend a lot of time at work. So you want to make sure that you're doing something that you're genuinely passionate about. And, you know, marketing is an industry that we I think, as an industry, could and should shout about much more and be much more proud of. There's a lot of talk about marketing as an industry being not having a voice at the table, etc. And I think we do so much and really can transform organizations through great marketing. I think as a young person, we want to help young people feel connected to that. So, you know, I think we as an industry need to communicate more passion about what we do. But I think we want young people to feel that passion and then to find their path. There's so many different aspects to marketing, of course, to find your path within it. So, you know, linked to that passion comment, Richie, I would just say is to try a few different parts of marketing before you settle on your path. You know, you might be a creative, you might be an insight person, you might be a campaign person, or you might want to try all of them. But try as many things as you can so that you learn what your passion is when you join an organization.
Yeah, great way to end. Again, another great piece of advice. And I like the way that you tipped it towards, you know, the transformational role of marketing, because it is so often pigeonholed as something much less than that. Paul, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Genuinely, I mean, we've covered a lot. I'll just do my best to recap some of the headlines from my point of view. So we talked a lot about help, and I think you're wired into that. That's wired into you. But very specifically, how can you be relevant and useful? So simple, but so powerful. We talked about your 10-year vision to become a CEO, now realized. All power to you for that. But I don't think it's changed you that much. It's definitely not gone to your head, but it shows that you can plot a path and be quite deliberate. And I think you're a very deliberate person. That's my impression. You know, not too much flounce, just pretty clear on what you want and going for it. Although sometimes you tilted too much to the ambition space, and you talked about building the bank of learning. And so that reset in South Africa, my sense is that was a really important moment in your life. So great to hear a little bit about that. And of course, talent is always there. You just got to look in the right places. And of course, everything that Richie and the team do at the School of Marketing is all about that. I loved when you said sort of get yourself out of the way. You can inadvertently get in the way of yourself or get in the way of whatever you're trying to do and cloud the message and relax. I mean, of course, easier said than done, but I do believe you can learn to enjoy public communication, public speaking, and the imperative is clear, as you say, otherwise you will camouflage the message. Great advice about how to get the value of marketing across. And in general, it's been a real treat just to hear your thoughts. Very clear in your thinking, very deliberate. And I'm sure you're going to go on to amazing things subsequent to this. So thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you, Mark. Really appreciate that. And great questions as well. So thank you. Really, really interesting session.
No, Paul, no, absolutely. Look, just from me, I think the key takeaway here from me, right, is, as I mentioned before, it's quite rare that we get the fortunate pleasure of a CEO joining us on the show. Although, please more join, obviously. But the broad point, I think, is it'll add as an inspiration for those who are about to take that next step into that role. And some of your key learnings were brilliant in that respect. But I think not only does it play to somebody who's looking to step into those shoes, but I think you've got the sense where you talked about the likes of listening, and a real sense of humility for even people at different stages, you know, right from getting in throughout as they go through. And I think this will act as a real inspiration for those people as well to really see how they can not only get into an industry, but then actually be able to climb right to the top of the ladder as well. So just a massive thank you, Paul, and an even bigger thank you for everything that you actually do for our industry, because I think it really is important and it's impactful, the stuff that you do and the time you give to all those various things, including us. So a big, massive thank you.
Thank you, Richie. Thanks. Really appreciate that and look forward to doing a lot more with you.